I've always loved camping, getting away from the noise of the city, the fresh air, the silence of the woods. But after what happened last summer, I don't think I'll ever go camping again. It was July 2023, and my friend Eric and I decided to spend the weekend at Blackwood National Forest, a secluded spot about 3 hours from home. It wasn't a touristy campground, no designated sites, no ranger stations, just miles of deep, untouched wilderness. We hiked in for about an hour before we found the spot, a small clearing near a stream, surrounded by dense trees. The place was completely silent, aside from the occasional chirping of birds. But looking back now, that should have been the first red flag. The silence was too complete. No rustling of animals in the underbrush. No insects buzzing. Just nothing. But we didn't think much of it at the time. We set up camp, made a fire, and by nightfall we were sitting around, roasting marshmallows and swapping ghost stories. We were having a great time. Then around midnight, we heard footsteps in the trees. It wasn't an animal. I've spent enough time outdoors to know what deer, raccoons, or even bears sound like. This was different. Slow, deliberate, human. Eric called out, "Hello?" But there was no answer. We pointed our flashlights into the trees, but the darkness was thick, the beam barely cutting through. Then just as suddenly as they started, the footsteps stopped. We tried to shake it off, telling ourselves it was probably another camper nearby. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. We decided to call it a night. We climbed into our tent and zipped it shut, but sleep wouldn't come. Every little sound outside made my skin crawl. At around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of breathing, not Eric's. This was coming from outside the tent. It was slow, heavy, right next to my head. I lay frozen, my heart pounding. I wanted to believe I was imagining it, but then I heard something worse. The zipper of our tent moving. Someone or something was trying to open it. I shot up and grabbed my flashlight, shining it straight at the entrance. Eric woke up, confused, and I whispered, "Someone's out there." We listened. Nothing. Then just beyond the thin fabric of the tent, we heard it. A voice. Low, raspy, barely above a whisper. It said my name. Eric and I bolted. We didn't stop to grab anything. We just tore out of the tent and ran as fast as we could through the dark, crashing through the trees, not stopping until we reached the car. We sped out of there without looking back. The next morning, once the sun was up and we felt brave enough, we drove back to get our gear. Everything was still there, except for the tent. All that remained was the shredded remains of the fabric, torn apart like something had clawed through it. The weirdest part, there were no footprints. The ground was soft from last night's rain, yet no sign of human tracks, only our own leading away. Eric and I stood there in silence, trying to process it. Then I noticed something else. Our campfire was still burning. It had rained a little before dawn. Everything around us was damp. The logs we had left behind were soaked, but the fire was untouched, like someone or something had been tending to it. I felt sick. We needed to get out of there. Eric grabbed the remains of his bag, and that's when I saw him freeze, his face draining of color. "Dude, look at this." He held up his backpack. The straps were cut clean through. Not frayed, not torn. Cut, as if someone had slashed it with a knife. I turned back to our destroyed tent, my mind racing. What the hell had been out here with us last night? A person? An animal? Something worse? That's when I saw it, carved into the tree beside the tent. A single word. Stay! We left immediately. I don't know what was out there with us that night, and I don't want to know. But I do know one thing. Something was watching us, and it didn't want us to leave. Camping in Redwood National Park was something I had been looking forward to for months. I'd planned a solo trip, 3 days alone in the woods, just me, my tent, and the sound of nature. It was supposed to be peaceful. It wasn't. I arrived around 4 p.m., hiked for about an hour, and set up camp in a small clearing surrounded by towering redwoods. The air was damp, and a thin fog was already rolling in. It gave the whole forest an eerie, almost dreamlike feel. But I wasn't worried. That changed as soon as I found the first sign that something wasn't right. As I was gathering firewood, I stumbled across something strange. A pile of clothes in the dirt. A flannel shirt, jeans, even a pair of boots. They weren't shredded like an animal had gotten to them. They were just neatly folded. I looked around, but I was alone. At least I thought I was. That night, the fog grew even thicker. I could barely see past the edge of my campfire. I sat there eating a granola bar, listening to the woods. Then somewhere in the distance, a whistle. Not a bird, not the wind. A person. A slow, two-note whistle coming from deep in the fog. I grabbed my flashlight and shined it into the trees. Nothing. The sound had stopped. I told myself it was another camper, but something about it felt wrong. I tried to sleep, but around 2 a.m., I woke up to a new sound. Soft, shuffling footsteps. Close. Too close. I held my breath, listening. The steps circled my tent once, twice. Then they stopped right outside the entrance. I could hear breathing. Slow, deep, inhumanly calm. I clenched my knife, ready to slash at whatever tried to get inside. But after what felt like an eternity, the footsteps moved away, slow, deliberate. Then, the whistling started again, but this time, it was much, much closer. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. When the sun finally came up, I unzipped my tent, expecting to see footprints in the dirt, but there were none. I packed up and left as fast as I could, practically running back to the trailhead. The whole way, I felt like I was being watched. Just as I reached my car, I glanced back one last time. The fog was still thick, rolling through the trees, and right at the edge of it, barely visible, was a figure, tall, motionless, watching me. Then just before I got in my car, it raised its hand and waved. I peeled out of there so fast I nearly crashed. I didn't tell anyone what happened because, honestly, I wasn't even sure what to say. But then a few weeks later, something weird happened. I was scrolling through a camping forum, reading about different places to visit, when I saw a post titled, "Who else has seen the man in the fog at Redwood?" My heart stopped. The post was filled with comments, people describing the same thing. A tall figure standing just at the edge of the fog, watching. Some said they heard the whistling. Others mentioned finding piles of neatly folded clothes in the dirt, just like I had. One person claimed they stayed an extra night to try and figure out who it was. Their last update just said, "Do not stay after dark. He gets closer." I never went back, and I never will.